Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call a meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just make the note that Don is absent tonight. Old business approval of minutes. The special meeting minutes of July 6, 2023 were provided for review. I need a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of July 6, 2023 as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Call a roll.
Mr. Bueller,
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Abstain.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Motion passed. Approval of minutes, the regular meeting minutes of 6 July 2023 were provided for review. Need a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of 6 July 2023 as presented.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Bueller,
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Abstain.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Motion passed. Audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? We'll get her first. Please come up and state your name and address.
My name is Anna Ferguson, and I live at 118 East Kansas.
Yep.
And I am here today to ask you guys to review the decision by the code enforcement regarding my neighbor's tree. My neighbor has 2 trees that are over 30 foot tall. They are dead. One of those branches destroyed my home in 2019. I had to rebuild it. Only a couple of days after that tree destroyed my home, a woman in Leavenworth died from a dead tree falling on her home. This tree is less than 24 feet from my house. The city in 2021 told me that the neighbor had to remove the tree in its entirety, not just the branches. I was never informed by the city that they decided that removing the lone branch after all the rest had fallen and caused damage was all they were going to require my neighbor to do. I have been contacting the city every year about this tree. You can drive by. I have pictures. But before this tree causes any more damage, it needs to come down.
Right. And Tim, I think we're contacting the property owner, right?
I spoke with the other
Okay.
property owner this afternoon. His take on it is a little bit different, but I did speak with him. He's in Lithuania right now. He asked that you guys don't take any action until he can come and speak to you guys himself.
He's
I
not
put-
the property owner.
The property owner is listed under the last name Morford, and that's
But
who I
her
spoke
name is
with.
Joy.
Okay, but it's the same last name, right?
Yes, but the wife is the actual property owner, not the husband.
Okay,
Well,
well, I
we'll find
spoke
out,
with the
yeah.
husband rather than the wife. Thank you for letting me know that. Can you pull up the 2 photos? So it's true, I mean, there was a terrible situation, and we're happy everyone was okay. So this was the tree beforehand, and then obviously there was a storm, and limbs fell onto Ms. Ferguson's house, which is on the left. And then if you can pull up the after, can you have them both up there at the same time? Is that okay? So I think there were some financial considerations. The property owner told me that removing everything that he removed was $5,000. So I think that was partially the consideration. And I guess I'd say too, he disputes the idea that the tree is dead. I haven't reviewed it. I haven't gone up there myself, but he disputes that.
There's nothing
anyway-
growing on the tree.
Well, and
No,
he
there's
said-
not a leaf. I can show you pictures of it currently.
he says there's little things sprouting.
There's a vine growing up the side of the picture to the right is current. There's a vine growing up it. It's been struck by lightning, and it has bark falling off of it. Huge chunks of bark.
I've been by, the tree is dead.
Yeah.
There's no,
I don't think
those sprouts
anybody can
around,
rest,
those sprouts
resuscitate
around
that
that
tree.
trunk don't mean the tree is.
So we're talking about what's left there
Right.
now?
The
Not
two-
the tree to the right of the driveway, but the double tree looking that's
Yeah.
dead there?
She has, I think she has some better pictures. Or just drive by.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in, the best pictures are the ones that those were ones that I just took yesterday.
So I don't know how a tree can be alive when it's been cut down the way it's been cut
not
down. Can somebody,
It's not alive. I think we're all convinced it's not alive.
okay,
Confusing thing to me is why they didn't take down the whole tree when they were there taking down the top part of the tree.
I think there were,
If there was a crew there, they could have eliminated the bottom part while they were there.
again, I
Saved them some money.
think it'd be worthwhile if the other property owner was here, but he's in Lithuania is what he said.
And he's selling the home.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
that's true. The home is on the
home
market or
sale
under
right now.
contract, so. But anyway, I think there were financial considerations for why it was cut the way it was. I think at that time, staff decided it was no longer a hazard at that point. They spoke to, I think, the tree trimming company about that. So I think they felt like it was suitable. And that's, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, a pretty significant portion of everything was removed. But it's true, it wasn't completely taken down all the way to the ground.
It's 30 foot tall, and if you Google about a dead tree, when it dies, the roots begin to decay, and the tree is going to fall over. It is 24 feet from my house. I got lucky that it hit the strongest part of my house in 2019.
you're right what you said there, because I had a tree that died, and the guy that cut it down said, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
you need to get it
Right,
down,
yeah.
because it's,
And
Well,
the
yeah.
tree falling on my house cost my insurance company $80,000 and cost me $7,000. So I'm already at a loss. When the tree fell on his house while he was renting it, it damaged my fence. That was work that came out of my family. We repaired our fence.
he didn't have to pay for it?
No, he did not pay for the repairs to my fence. He did not, his insurance was not responsible for his tree falling on my home. I can show you a picture from 2015 when the first branch fell and the city had to talk to him about that branch in 2015. This tree has been an issue since 2015. He specifically told me when he got the last branch took down that if he had known it would have been more expensive to take down that one than all of them, it would have never fallen on my house. He would have taken care of it earlier, but it was more expensive for the one branch.
What's the ordinance say about the dead tree?
There are two places in the code, in city code, that it talks about dead trees. One of which is the one that we use most often is a hazard. That says it should be removed. The other one in section 9 under the minimum maintenance says that dead trees should be removed.
Okay, and
The
who
cost-
who determines whether?
I want to tell you something. I got a letter from the city because the city thought a tree that died was on my property. If you didn't know better, you would.
Sure.
It looked like it.
Sure.
But it wasn't. So, you know, I know that issue has been addressed in the past.
Sure, absolutely.
Right, so I guess what I'm saying is, have we told this homeowner that that's an issue by code and that he's going to need to take it down?
I think we'd probably need permission to go on the property to have someone inspect it. We haven't,
Well, I mean-
we haven't gone onto the property yet. I've spoken to him on the phone, but we haven't gone on.
No, I mean, if you drive by somewhere in the city, right, and you see a dead tree, you have to have, what, a tree doctor come and assess whether it's alive or dead before you do that? An arborist?
I mean, if it's thousands of dollars and someone told me, I'd
Okay.
want an
So-
arborist, yeah.
So, I mean, we would get an arborist to go out there and check it. Is it, I'm just
In
trying to
theory,
think through the
yeah,
process.
In theory, yeah.
And then if he says, that tree's dead, it needs to come down, and the property owner says, I'm not taking it down, would we do like we do when we mow lawns and say, okay, we'll take it down and it's gonna go against your
I
lien
guess it
on
would
your
go
house?
against the taxes of that house.
Yeah.
Again, that's where I feel like it would be good for you guys to
Sure.
talk to that homeowner.
Well, no, I mean, he can have, or she can have their say. We're hearing one side, which is fine, but I'm just looking for a way forward. So the way forward is to have somebody assess that tree and whether it's alive or dead, and then if it's against our code, then we're gonna have it taken down if the owner doesn't take it down. And there's
Yeah,
certain-
I think it's a great idea to talk to the homeowner.
I guess the
I look
owner of
forward
the house
to it.
being here is kind of a moot point to me. If the tree's dead, the tree's dead.
Well, that's what I said. The plan
We
was
gotta
to
give-
have it
we gotta
assessed,
give him a chance to
and then once
tear it
somebody
down.
tells us it's confirmed, you can't resuscitate it, then we'll have the firm, it's a dead tree, right? Once we get that, we
Well,
can,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things we'd have to do is go out and issue a citation first if that was determined that it is a dead or, tree that's gone and can't be repaired, so to speak. We'd have to go out and issue a citation. He'd have the opportunity to come in and make his argument through code enforcement if there would be an argument, or he can just concede the point and we can move on. And if he can't take it down, we can proceed as you were discussing in reference to like the weed.
That would be the
weed
purpose
issue.
of the letter to the homeowner after we assess the tree. Right? Yeah, we'll send
Yes, sir.
them a letter. We'll probably give them a letter first and then a citation after that. Yeah. Just like we do with any code enforcement.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am.
Thank you.
Probably have others out there just like it. I know I've got one in my neighborhood.
were there any other folks who wanted to speak? Rob?
Good evening, Rob Gaslin, Cottonwood Drive here in Lansing and with Fire District 1.
Michael Stackhouse, Fire Chief, Fire District 1, 195th Street.
So I want to talk this evening for a few minutes in continuing our series to fill in some gaps that we think that might be out there, this time talking about budget. So for the next 4 hours or so, no, I'm kidding. We're going to race through this as best we can. I do want to talk just a little bit about our philosophy and our process, and then Chief's going to come up and race through his part a little bit on 2024 budget development at the Fire District, just highlighting some key things for you to think about. Before I do that, though, I want to circle back to a couple weeks ago where we talked about our ISO classifications, the Insurance Services Office and their Public Protection Classification, or PPC ratings that they do of not just the fire district, but of the community's readiness for suppressing fires. So if you weren't here, it's not only what the fire department can do, but what about the dispatch system? What about the water supply? What about the hydrants? A whole series of things. Again, it looks at the community. And so if you recall, they issue us a number of points in a different set of, or different sets of categories and subcategories. Unlike whose line is it anyway, the points do matter, so more points are better. But then they ultimately give us an overall score where low score is better and can lead to lower insurance ratings, but more importantly, it indicates the community's readiness for fire suppression. So low score is better in that regard. Of course, it takes more resources, more time to get lower or better scores. Now, there was one subcategory, though, that of a ladder company, where we scored very low on, because we don't have a ladder company, and a reserve ladder company we scored 0 on, because we don't have any reserve capability. So what do we as a fire district, what do the Board of Trustees, to include the chief, do with something like that? Is that a valid evaluation? Is it something we should worry about or not? Is it signal or is it noise? And that's what we think about. One of the tools that we use to work through, think through just such circumstances is our own strategic planning model. You've got a copy of it. It's the pretty little color picture there. Most of you have worked through, maybe all of you have worked through something similar, and this is not anything that we've necessarily invented. The ends, ways, and means, if you've worked with the federal government, that should be very familiar to you. So quite simply, we would take something like what the ISO folks do. We would consider that an external evaluation, somebody coming in from outside and taking a look at us in a systematic way and giving us feedback, looking at what is going on in the community and the fire district. So that's an evaluation. That's that yellow line at the bottom going over to the left where we enter the chart, where we're going to take what the ISO folks tell us and do some front-end analysis. A whole bunch of different tools we can apply to do that analysis. But then once we do that, once we determine, yeah, there's some signal there and it's not just noise, then what do we do with it? And that's where it goes into our ends, ways, and means process. The end simply determining what strategic outcome, what result do we want, what ways are we going to pursue that, and what are the means or the resources that we're going to do that. So if your young teenager comes home and says, I need a new car, and you look at him with a little side eye and say, no, you want a new car. What you need is transportation. And so, of course, one means to the end is to get a new car for the teenager, but another means might be the older teenage sister is going to be driving the younger teenager around for a couple of years, so that's a different means to that same end. So we do the same kind of thing. We want to make sure that we've correctly identified ends and don't have means masquerading as ends, and we work through ways and means. And then the cycle repeats. We get some kind of a result from whatever change we might have made, and we evaluate it downstream, because not all, this may come as a shock to you, not all government programs do what we think that they're going to do, and we don't always get the right bang for the buck, and so the cycle repeats. So that's our process, and going back to that ISO rating, low score in terms of a ladder capability, if you flip the page, there's a strategic planning tool right behind that that looks at that very question. And this is just hot off of our current budget cycle. So over on the left, you see the ends, which looks at aerial suppression. Notice we didn't say fancy new truck. That would be a means, or maybe a way. But the ends are aerial capability. And wonky fire talk, they say elevated master stream. That's just fancy words for having a very large hose with large volume, large pressure at the top of something high up, usually a ladder, so that it can direct a lot of water directly down onto a fire, either for a tall building or a very wide building. It's far more effective in fire suppression than arcing a stream from a hose some distance away on the ground. The stream disperses as it arcs over the top, and you don't know where it lands. So the aerial fire suppression is considered far more effective. And we reference different sources. We don't put our finger into the wind and decide, hey, we'd like to do this. It's fun to do new toys and all of that. The National Fire Protection Association kind of gives us the science of how to organize for firefighting. So we look and we find specific references that advise us on, in this case, aerial fire suppression. The ISO folks, by virtue of the low score in this case, are sending us a signal, and we think that it's valid. You guys are sending us a signal. So when we look at current structures, such as a high school, which has a very wide horizontal span, or apartment complexes, 2, 3, or more stories tall, or when we sit in meetings and hear urban planners talking about your housing plans, where maybe more medium and possibly even high density, all of those things are signal to us that perhaps we need to get in front of this, because this is long lead time stuff, that we need to look at aerial fire suppression. So that's on the end side of it. If you look in the middle, ways, in this case, we're not in the market for buying a truck at this stage, or any other particular means. So we've listed it as ways, the acquisition of. So it's some kind of a process. We have a goal in the district to minimize debt financing. So in the past, the fire district probably necessarily has had to do a lot of debt financing. That's the past. In the future, we want to minimize that as best we can. It's fancy words for saying we want to save money so we can at least partially finance that ourselves. And oh, by the way, are we accepting risk? If we think we have this problem now, are we accepting risk by not having an aerial capability right now? The answer is yes, we think, but can we mitigate that risk? Can we manage it? And the answer is yes, we're doing that. One way of doing that is with agreements with mutual aid and auto aid with other communities. So the city of Leavenworth does have this capability. They can't park their equipment close enough for us to get an improvement in our ISO scores in that particular lane. But we know that capability is there. If we ever had such an emergency, could they help? Certainly. Might take them longer to get here, or they might have to have that equipment on something that, on their emergency, that might not be available. But yes, those are things that we can do. Other things include doing pre-incident planning, so we might be able to control risk that way. We might be able to strengthen our building or our fire codes or enforce the ones that we have more strongly to help mitigate risk. So all those kinds of things we would do to mitigate risk in the interim. And then over on the right side, the means, and this is the means for right now. Again, it doesn't say go out and buy a truck, but we want to fully fund our reserve accounts so that we are year on year building that capability to eventually purchase to meet this this particular end. We want to explore grants, typically from the United States Fire Administration, part of FEMA, and then go out and look and see if our mutual aid and our auto aid agreements are tweaked in order to help us specifically with this capability. So this is just to show you how we approach our problems, to include our budget problems, but something hopefully a little bit better and more mature than finger wetted in the air, and to show you how we try to solve these particular problems. So the chief is going to talk briefly about the other three that are in the stack, but real quickly just outlining our particular process. It's the same as yours. We follow all the same rules as all the other municipalities, municipality governing bodies. We have some special legislation that refers specifically to fire districts, but otherwise it's the same. We follow the Kansas Open Meeting Act, the Kansas Open Record Act, all of the required timelines, same as everybody else, same as the city of Lansing. We think we follow all those things religiously. Mentioned before, we have this built-in, by design, this inherent tension, organizational tension between the chief representing the department and the trustees representing the taxpayers, and not just the taxpayers from providing tax dollars, but taxpayers for providing the services to those taxpayers. So we look at that from their perspective, and the chief brings the departmental perspective, and we have it out as we need to. So the strategic planning process is designed to help us do good decision making, to publicize our decision making, and to fully justify any expenditures. We would articulate that in public meetings or hearings or running into a man on the sidewalk. However we need to, we're going to try to communicate our reasoning as you see on these pieces of paper. Our reserves, we have two types of reserves, all authorized by Kansas statute. We have an equipment reserve, which is, I hate to call it a rainy day fund, but that's our relatively small fund that helps us manage or buffer any changes in expenditures year on year. If we have a building collapse on a piece of equipment or something, that would be what we would turn to help buffer our budget. The bigger one is the Fire Protection Reserve Fund, and that's where we salt away money for a rainy day, if you will, but specifically for major end items, such as a possible aerial fire suppression piece of equipment. And again, it's been our philosophy to try to avoid debt financing. We're never going to be able to avoid it completely, but we want to be good stewards, kind of reduce the turbulence for the taxpayer, and have a little more control over what the process is and spend less money on debt. So that's the goal. We have a whole slew of tools that serve as internal controls to make sure we don't have any fraud, waste, and abuse. And I can tell you we don't. They're very effective. We also have an external auditor. The auditor has just finished up that process, so we have a good look at what we're doing every year. We also provide a number of documents to all of the entities, so the city and the 2 townships get documents every year to include our final budgets, the audit documents will go to you, Tim, end of this month or early next month. Budget documents will get to you in September. At the end of the year, we do an asset inventory of all of the major items, the facilities, big items, people. And we give that to all 3 entities. So if you're not seeing it, council members, the mayor and city administrator get that stuff, so ask them for it. So bottom line is we have a process, we have philosophy. I think we have good tools that allow us to plan well and allow us to justify the expenditures. We try to take a look at every dollar, every penny, and honor the taxpayer, not only with being frugal, but with making sure that everything is aligned with capability that's needed for the community. So the chief's going to come up and talk briefly about budget year 2024 and the development of that. Chief?
Hey, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Before you go real quick, if I may.
Please.
Since you brought up the aerial fire suppression system, and maybe this may be a question for the chief to answer when he comes up. So you have you talked about the equipment reserve funds, the fire protection funds, major end items, that kind of stuff, and you talk about how you maintain those systems within cycle. So
The funds?
Yeah. So
sure.
So you have you have the funds set aside to what buy so much gear, so much apparatus, so much masks, so much helmets, so much uniforms every year. You're
Right.
buying, right? Because this stuff expires, and we don't have firemen, even volunteers, wearing anything that's expired, right?
Right, that's correct. And none of that normally comes from any reserve fund. That's part of our annual budget. But to answer your question, I think you're also asking, both reserve funds use the Kansas Municipal Investment Pool, the KMIP. That's where we put those funds, and that's where we monitor them. And currently we're enjoying all of the fruits of the high interest rates that hurt everybody else. It does help in this particular regard. But specifically the things that you listed are normal operating things. If we're not accounting for wear out of equipment, of routine wear out of equipment, of uniforms and such, then he's not doing his job and the board isn't. So
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. When you guys have meetings, you address those where you may have, 15 to 20% of the
Yes.
uniforms from head to toe, which is extremely expensive if my other board members don't know, for one person in that outfit. But you're changing so many a year because you can't.
correct. That is,
You can't change every one of them at the same time.
Right.
You got them programmed out.
and probably like the police department as well, handheld radios, rather than get 100 of them all at once. We try to have life cycle management of that, where every year it's a certain number of replacements, and
Yeah.
smooth out the turbulence so we don't have
Okay.
big spikes in the budget. That's
Thank
the
you.
approach. Yes.
Good evening, gentlemen. So in your packet, toward the back, is a proposed budget for 2024. That's basically what I'm presenting to the Fire District 1 Board of Trustees. The total budget is $1,864,593. And I'm just going to so what you have is a highlight. It's not a line item. It gives you just a basic glimpse. And you're more than welcome to come down or call me, and I'll come up and go line item by line item with each of you. Not a problem. So I'm going to kind of tie in a couple of strategic models that are tied into the budget as well. And you'll see first is personnel. Personnel makes up 69% of our budget. That's relatively a low number, but that's because we're a fire district. We have the capital outlay, all the other items built in our budget as well. Just a reference, Leavenworth City Fire Department their personnel budget is 96% of their budget.
And national average is 90.
And national average is 90 or above. So in your,
Why is ours 69%?
because we also have our capital outlay and everything built into our budget, so it reduces the personnel. Meaning in a municipality, your capital outlay is typically in another
Oh, and another fund. Like a
fund,
fund.
right.
I got you.
Okay. So, as we're on personnel, I've mentioned several times, and I think everybody understands that we're in a personnel crisis. It's hard to keep both full-time career personnel. It's hard to get applicants. I've had 2 applicants for open positions for over 6 months. Volunteers, it's just, we keep trying to do things to enhance the people that we have to get them to show up to more. The reality is that it's going away, and it's going away at a rapid pace. So if you look at one of your strategic planning tools, adequate staffing, one end means that we need, well, the 2 end means that we need is we need recruits, we need people to apply, and then once we get those recruits, those applicants, we fill the positions, then we need retention. So I've been talking to the board, developed what I call an adult cadet program. I call a cadet as a firefighter or a person who does not have the certifications or training to be a firefighter. So I have 2 initiatives in the future. One of them is to work with educational facilities and get a youth cadet program, 17, 18 year range. So I'm calling this the adult cadet program for that reason, because I'm reaching out, trying to find adults that want to work, that want to be a firefighter, that don't have the certifications or the education or the experience. I've got 3 levels, basically 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 is nothing, no education, no certifications. We're going to bring them in. We're going to train them in-house on the fire side. And then we're going to send them to Johnson Community College and pay for their EMT course. Level 2 has some certifications. Level 3 has everything except EMT. So, along with us training them and spending the man hours, money, the expense, what we're requiring, what I'm suggesting is a contract, that level 1 retention 5-year contract. We're going to train you, we're going to hire you with no experience, we're going to pay you to work, do other things, train, and during that process, you're going to get valuable experience, you're going to get certifications you need, the EMT certification as well, we're going to pay for that, and but you're going to promise us to stay with us for 5 years, or you're going to pay for the training that you receive. So that's kind of the model that we're working toward. Impacting the budget as along with the personnel is training. We have to have educated instructors that make an impact on the people that we bring in. That young firefighter has to be taught the right way, which in order to do that, in order to have good instructors in-house, means we have to fork out the money for continuous training and education for the instructors themselves. Build that knowledge base, build that experience, and pass it on to the others. So, also in the budget is purchasing training props. This year in the budget is a forcible entry door prop. Simply a door, a steel door that we use different tools, Halligan tool, and we teach forcible entry. One would think that wouldn't be a big deal, right? But that door is $10,000. So that's what we deal with in the fire service. You put fire in front of it, and the cost exponentially goes up. All right, moving on. Commodities. Now, I'm basically highlighting the things that are above and beyond that I'm asking for this year. I think I'll answer your question too, Councilman Major. So this year, boots, helmets, and gloves because our current inventory, we have several products that are expiring. So last year we bought 12 sets of turnout gear. Turnout gear, the pants and coat, suspenders, you're looking at a little under $3,000. Then you add in the boots, gloves, helmets, etc. You're talking, another $1,000 per set. So that's the expenses we deal with. Under capital expenses,
They just last so long. Is that
they
what you're
do.
saying?
Majority of the things, not everything, but like turnout gear, things that we take inside the fire, it has a 5-year expiration. Moving on to capital expenses, I do have listed as a new command vehicle that will be replacing the 2013 Ford F-250. Couple of reasons for asking for replacement is aging, high mileage, over 100,000. It's starting to, the expenses to maintain are starting to show. Excuse me. And then also when it was purchased, it was set up as a utility vehicle and not a command vehicle. So basically it's a pickup truck that hauls a bunch of chain straps, etc. in the back and just not set up appropriately. It was set up for a volunteer department. As things evolve, as the hazards rise, as the city grows, the more hazards arise, and you just need to be set up to be able to handle those hazards. Also in capital, battery-powered scene lighting system for the truck, and battery-powered saw for the 3 engines. Last year, we bought battery-powered extrication tools. It gives us a whole lot of maneuverability. We're able to grab the tools, go down the hillside, rather than set up a power unit, drag the hose, and find out it doesn't reach to the vehicle that's down the hill. So our capabilities have increased tremendously as far as extrication. We also need to change out our PCs and laptops, 5 new PCs and 4 new laptops. Everything we have is so old that it's unable to update to Windows 11 OS. So they're due for change. All right, and then just the budget breakdown, and it's on your last sheet. Personnel, that includes the salaries, benefits, and taxes. So 1.283,995 million goes to personnel. Commodities, 78,750. Contractual, 257,692. Capital outlay, 158,556. This year to equipment reserve 0, and then fire protection reserve 25,000, and then lease purchase 61,000. We just next month, September, we'll be paying off one of the engines in the house. That'll leave the about 100 and I think it's on your paper, it's not on mine, but it's over 100,000 left on the one engine. So. The fire protection reserve, just to answer, so we do everything line item. I try to suggest the maximum to put into the fire protection reserve, and then anything that is not spent, we have a carryover requirement for January to meet salary because our first tax installment until January 20th. But once meeting that or set aside the money for that, then the intent is that we always put the rest of the money toward a reserve for the future. So, in closing, I'd just like to say, I've got the budget line item by line item. I'm more than happy to sit down with any of you or the public. Nothing's secret; it's all open. But you're more than welcome to call me, or I'll come up and see you or whatever. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions? Thank you. All right, thanks, Chief. Thanks, Rob. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to the council? Okay, new business, executive session, personnel matters. I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exception of KSA 75-4319 Bravo 1 for 20 minutes, beginning at 7:40 and ending at 8 o'clock.
So moved.
Move.
Have a motion and a second. Call roll.
Mr. Bueller,
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
We are in executive session. So.
Are we moving or are they moving? You ready?
Oh, with the event, you know? Oh. Yeah.
Make a motion to return to open session.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to return to open session.
No binding.
And no binding, what was it? No binding action was taken during the executive session. So call roll.
Mr. Bueller,
Yes.
Mr. Clemens,
Yeah.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Mr. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Kirby,
Yes.
Mr. Major,
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.
Motion passed. Reports from the department heads. Any reports?
I actually do have one.
Okay.
It's weird, but I do. So first off, just if you didn't hear, the city is looking forward to partnering with Zimmerman Properties as they start work on Covington Woods Phase 2. So that's exciting for us. And then I have two event-related items. First off, I think everybody knows Independence Day went very well at Town Center this year. However, it's probably not, due to the apartments, probably not going to be a good place to hold a fireworks show next year. So keep in the back of your mind, start thinking about what and where specifically you would like to host the fireworks show next year.
I thought we already determined that it would be out at Bernard Park.
There are options. I don't think that staff has been directed in any particular way, but that is very high on the list.
That was thrown out a while back. I know at a staff meeting, I think we were talking to someone throughout the idea. Do you guys remember that Lansing Days 5 or 6 years ago when it rained? And so we did it at the high school, in that big parking lot at the high school. So that was something that could also be evaluated as well as Bernard Park. So.
And then lastly, in relation to our other big events at the Fall Festival, we have been thinking and looking at that. We're working on the plans for this event. The church has been a very good partner for the city for multiple years on that event. It's a great location. As my event planner, Denise, is working with vendors and getting them in and signed up, she has run into some issues. About 30% of the vendors from last year are not re-upping. And the stated reason was that they did not like the walk or the load-in from the parking lot all the way back to the back piece of Angel Falls Trail. And so I was looking for some direction from the council about whether or not we continue to stay as...
Don't they just drive gators back there all the time anyway?
We do, but there was still some discussion from the vendors about that load in, load out process.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's
What percent did you say, Josh?
30%.
And I was going to say what the mayor said. So we have Gators helping.
We do. Yep.
Do you remember when that event was held at Kelly Grove Park?
Yeah.
It was a swamp most of it.
Right.
It was horrible down there.
It's a great.
These guys don't know how good they got it, honestly.
It's a great venue right now. I mean, I would ask whoever the vendors are what we could do to help them.
Yeah.
I mean,
And staff is already on top of that.
Yeah.
Denise, we are working with Parks and everybody else in the city. Obviously, we want to help. We want to make the event as good as possible, and so we will continue to help.
But it's
and
such
so
a cool location.
Yeah. So we're excited to continue working with the church. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and so we'll work with the church and try to figure out how to make that best for everybody. But that's all I have.
all right, thanks. City attorney, are you out there?
Mr. Mayor, I am here and I have nothing to report, sir.
Okay, thank you. I was waiting. Tim?
I don't have anything.
Okay, thanks. Greg?
Oh, wow, me first. Thanks to everybody that came, our 2 residents that actually came to watch the meeting. Thank you. We appreciate that. A lot of stuff happened on this day in history.
Yeah,
I'm
just
going to
give us
cover a
one.
couple of them. On this day in 1969, Apollo 11 successfully landed in the Sea of Tranquility on the moon, and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first men on the moon. On this day in 1964, Earl and Sue Bueller gave birth to their bouncing baby son, Greg. That's all I have.
It's your duty to bring a
I don't
cake.
know. Is there a censure kind of thing that we can do?
Go edit that.
Dan,
Could we strike that from the record, please?
please.
Tim has sent out letters on some activity that we had in our homeowners association up there in Ward 4, where some of the homeowners
Yes.
took, exception to the development of the park. There was some slightly erroneous information distributed. A petition went out and everything. And I've looked at the diagrams. The trail is, the cement part is 8 foot. The city property is 40 foot. So there's 16 feet on either side. The plans have the back of the houses at the trail, and it's heavily wooded. The only thing we'd have to be careful of is the utilities. We wouldn't be able to let them use the right-of-ways for utilities, or we would be destroying trees that's in our area. The other thing that the council will have to consider is how are they going to get into the east side development there at Fairway Estates. That if we come through the DeSoto Road, we got to cut down trees the width of a car to let them into it. Or we let them come in through one of 3 access points from the north at Pebble Beach, through the HOA up on the north side, through Woodland Hills, Pebble Beach Drive on that side, or through the fairways. There's nothing, just, you're going to need to think about it, because we would have to give the developer access through it, permission to cut trees, or we say it's got to come through the housing development when they come through the other side of the.
I'm kind of confused.
He bought the
Like
gray
the
house.
planning commission is the one who's going to determine whether or not he can put X wherever, the developer.
Right.
Whether trees are in the way or not.
But he bought the property.
We are definitely going to consider the path and our 16 foot that we own on each side of that path to make sure that the trail has foliage all along it as much as we can. But I mean, you need to tell everybody, if the developer owns the property, they always try to keep as many trees as they can, and we also give them some incentives to do so. But it's their property. We prefer they don't cut trees down, but we'll do our best. I guess what I'm saying is they're the owner of the property.
Yeah, the concern was that the trail was in jeopardy.
Right.
And it's not.
It's not.
And neither is 16 feet of trees on
Right.
either side of the trail.
Outside of that, we can't really control it, but we'll control what the city can control to try to keep as many trees as we can.
And my intent was just to bring it up for you to consider and think about if you hear it from other sources. The other thing I want to tell you about is at the land search meeting last week, it was announced that the golf course sold on the 30th of June. I've gotten with the deeds, Office of Deeds. No deeds has been filed yet. So I don't know if that was just a rumor or if it actually did sell.
There are rumors all over social media. You can't believe anything you read these days.
But this was in the meeting with the people that do the development. I put a little bit more weight on that. But With that, Mayor, that's everything I've got.
Okay, thanks. Gary?
Tim, thank you for the email today about that, giving us a heads up. That was very informative. So that's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Gary. Kevin?
Yep, thank you, Tim, for that, and Rob and everybody else for coming in. Appreciate it. That's all I have tonight.
Dean?
The only thing I'll add is the David A. Trinkle Jr. Memorial Plaque has been installed at the park. The guy that installed it said that was the hardest rock he'd ever worked with. Rest assured,
Nice.
that rock wasn't going anywhere, and it was paid for privately.
So it's only fitting that rock
Very
is
nice.
so hard. Right along with a hard-headed man.
There you go. There you go. That's all I have.
Thank you for doing
Okay.
that, Gene.
Thanks, Gene, for coordinating that. Marcus?
Thanks, Tim, and your staff. You know, the fact that we get to be up here and do this and work with you all and go through some of these good things that come in here tonight, Rob and some others, it's a great job. This is a great place to serve, and it's a great city. So, Mayor, that's all I got.
Jess?
Yeah, I got a question. Can we explore hiring an additional code enforcement officer? To me, I drive around the city and I go for walks with my wife, and I bring this up all the time, that I see stuff constantly that we could knock on a door and say, hey, you realize you're breaking a code here.
Yeah.
For instance, at 219 Fairlane Street, there are 3 boats behind this house in the grass. We adopted a code a year ago that said you can't do that. These boats have been sitting behind this house for 23 years without moving. And I don't know how people can get away with that stuff. So apparently our code enforcement officer that we have now isn't doing a very good job, or we need to hire more people. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah. No, we can double check on that. I can't remember if you had spoken to me about the Fairlane one before.
Yeah, and our code enforcement officer knocked on the guy's door. And the guy said, oh, I'm going to do something with him.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with a lot of this is we knock on the door sometimes.
Yeah.
People give us the runaround, and then it magically disappears.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more follow-up with some of these things. And, you know, if we're going to do an inspection somewhere and we're driving by someplace and we see something, we don't like say, oh, turn a blind eye to it, but we need to stop. You know, I know we have appointments, but maybe on the way back, stop and say, hey, you know what, this is a code violation. Because we have a lot of great people in this city that are living next to problems. I'll just call it that. So he's shaking his head. He knows what I'm talking about.
Josh, do we track? Like, does the code enforcement officer put out a thing that says, hey, I cited this person, gave him a letter, did whatever, so we can keep track of these so the council can get them, like, quarterly, so then we can later on go, hey, here's the follow-up. They did the...
Yeah, there's a very general summary that we have. At one point, I think I received a more specific one that listed certain addresses and things like that.
Well, I mean, that would be good to provide the council, so when they're out and they're like, oh, this needs fixed, and they can go to the spreadsheet and go, oh, we already got him a letter, so I'm not going to bring that up at the council meeting.
The item you're
with
bringing
that
up,
being said, I mean, I go back to like the Burger King thing from last week.
Right.
I mean, it takes 2 weeks for grass to grow up to where someone will actually complain. Then you send them a letter and they got 10 days.
Yeah.
So essentially you got a whole month before you have to mow your grass.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be shortened somehow. Because Burger King was a complete catastrophe. It was an eyesore to our community. And it took a month to get that thing taken care of.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And I know it's not your fault. I was aggravated with it
No,
because honestly,
yeah.
my wife yelled at me for it.
Yeah.
So
that's a really fair point. And I know you and I had spoken, and I was able to look at our software and see when we sent that certified letter to those people. And the the Fairlane example, maybe that it sounds like that is something that we should have caught and should have been better about. The one thing that I will say though, and you kind of almost took the words out of my mouth. A lot of times we do talk to people and we will give them certified letters. We will give them notice and they will wait until that 9th or 10th day. And that's one of the things that's a challenge sometimes. We will have people that are really torqued thinking we're not doing anything when in reality we did. with the person's waiting until day 9 or 10.
Perception. Yeah.
Well, so I guess I'd say though, kudos to you on that Burger King thing, because you did reach out to me and say, Tim, did we send them a letter? And I was able to pull it up and say, yeah, we did. So I mean, I guess I'd say if you guys are frustrated, let us know, and I can tell you guys if we've sent a letter, and if we haven't, we can get on that.
How does that work?
So
Does he go out and drive around the city?
Yep. Every day he's out in his truck driving around. He will leave door hangers to try to as that knock when somebody's not doesn't answer the door or whatnot. Then the letter is sent. There's a 10-day period, and then hopefully at that point they will have addressed the
Is the
issue.
process the problem of how we approach when something is recognized as an issue? Is that something we need to tighten up? Maybe like Jesse said.
See, and I felt like we. Sorry.
No, I don't know where the issue is, because
If you guys recall, I think last year we switched the grass heights from 12 inches to 10 in residential zones, and I think to even 8 in commercial zones. And I think the goal of that was to tighten it up. So maybe some of it is we just need to do a better job. That might be part of it. But again, I would encourage you guys, if you do see something, shoot me a text, shoot Josh a text, and say, hey, have we done anything on this? Because sometimes we have, and sometimes we've missed it.
Right.
So.
thank you.
That's all. I've got to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. Call roll.
Mr. Bueller.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens.
Yes.
Mr. Brungard.
Yes.
Mr. Gardner.
Yes.
Mr. Kirby.
Yes.
Mr. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes.